Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome back to News Globe. This is Laraib Shahid. सबसे पहले तो I'm so sorry. I think my mic is not working for some reason. I tried all the ways, but it still is not working. So I'm just gonna give up and I'm gonna get straight into it because आज जो हमने discuss करना है it's about India and Pakistan, which is very time sensitive and it's very important for us to understand what happened, how it happened, and what's gonna happen next. और इन सब चीज़ों को explain करने के लिए Hassan Raza, who's a legal and political analyst, is going to join me. Thank you, Hassan, for joining us. Last time हमने जहाँ से बातें छोड़ी थी उस वक्त सिचुएशन जो थी वो tensions were brewing up, लेकिन अब एकदम से जो है वो we've seen what happened between the past few days. And it's very important कि हम इसको break down करें just so our audience knows what has happened, how it has happened. So I think we're going to start with, because background तो audience के पास है, but let's just start with something जो एक बहुत अवाम में एक बहुत उस चीज का आप कह लें कि गुस्सा भी था शायद, और उनको क्यूरोसिटी भी थी इस चीज की कि व्हाई इज पाकिस्तान नॉट रिस्पोंडिंग. So let's just start from there.
I think we have responded. First and foremost, I think it's very important to understand that our military took down more than 80 of the incoming UAVs and drones that were sent in by India on that particular day. But more importantly, इसमें I think कुछ थोड़ी technical details होती हैं which over the period of time आपको understand लोग करते हैं जाके. एक तो ये था कि I think these drones were basically sent in by the Indians for a reason that they wanted to gather intelligence, which is obviously the one aim of surveillance drones to start with. And the other was to also detect where our air defense systems are, because they were also planning on striking again into Pakistan. So before they actually went for it, they were actually trying to identify the air defense systems in Pakistan. And we, by the way, on the night around 3:30 and 3:40 a.m., we were able to understand the strategy of the enemy for that matter. And that is why, because these Israeli drones, or I mean, the technology comes from Israel for that matter at least, was the ones that had a EMS suit on them. So we wanted to make sure that while shooting them down, we do not end up giving the position of our air defense systems. अच्छा, उसके साथ एक और भी बात बड़ी ज़रूरी है समझने के लिए कि आप जब अपने एयर डिफेंस सिस्टम्स के साथ ड्रोन्स को स्ट्राइक डाउन करते हैं तो आप इवेंचुअली एक कॉस्ट एनालिसिस भी करते हैं. When it comes down to shooting a drone, there are two ways to do it. There's one way which we can say is kinetic, which is a hard kill, which means that you fire a missile, it goes on to hit that particular drone that has been intercepted and was coming into your territory. But the other, and possibly where we have actually been very successful, and we should be proud of that, is the electronic warfare, in which you go on to do a soft kill, which is that one way or the other you hack into that, to put it in simple words, hack into that drone, और आप उसकी जो जिस टेंजेंट पे वो आ रहा होता है उसको खत्म करते हैं, and we actually bring it down. So a lot of soft kills also took place. Acha, and then there is also a realization that needs to be there कि when such swarms of drones are coming in, you cannot just go on to fire missile on every drone that is coming in, or for that matter deploy all your air defense systems over there. और उसमें ये है कि आपका जो it's like the cost of firing a particular quadcopter, or for that matter a particular UAV, would be much higher. So ये दुनिया में नहीं होता. हमने यूक्रेन की वॉर में ये देखा है और जगहों पे देखा है कि ये अभी भी दुनिया में ये चीज़ें अडॉप्ट कर रही हैं, आहिस्ते आहिस्ते इवॉल्व कर रही हैं. और उसके बाद वी शुड ऑल्सो रिमेंबर बाय द वे दैट वी सेंट इन, एंड दिस हैज नाउ बीन कंफर्म्ड बाय द इंडियन DGMOs, the Army DGMO, as well as the Chief of Operations of the Air Force, that we sent in swarms of drones within India and the reason was the same, and that is how we ended up actually identifying where their SAM batteries and S400 were. So I think it's actually a kind of अगर ये है किसी का ख्याल कि नहीं किया तो ये मेरे ख्याल से गलत. दूसरा, इट वाज आल्सो अ साइकोलॉजिकल वॉरफेयर वाली बात है, या साइकोलॉजिकल ऑपरेशन था। जब आपके शहरों में आप देखते हैं कि ड्रोन्स गिर रहे हैं, तो आपको लगता ही है कि शायद आपके अंदर ये कैपेबिलिटी नहीं है कि आप इन ड्रोन्स को नीचे गिरा सकते हैं, और उसकी वजह से एक पैनिक क्रिएट होता है। एंड इंडिया वांटेड अस ऑन दैट वेरी डे टू actually strike back, because उनको बहुत heavy hits हो चुके थे, so they were in one way or the other luring Pakistan to strike back on their terms, but we were able to one way or the other defy that, and we did it on our own day of choosing,
Hmm.
and did it very well. So I think in that sense, I would disagree with that suggestion कि हमने कुछ नहीं किया उसके ऊपर।
Cool. Okay. When you say we struck India back on the day of our own choosing in the shape of Operation Banyan al Mursus, which was, by the way, a word which most of Pakistanis didn't know, but now I think everybody knows what it means. Uh, was this operation a success?
Certainly. देखिए, Penny, I think there's one thing that we need to understand, which is very important, and
Hmm.
that is that war in itself represent the utmost failure of human rationality.
Hmm.
And war between two nuclear armed states means that it is a catastrophe in making, जो किसी भी time escalate कर सकती है जाके. So
Hmm.
first and foremost, हमें कोई, I think Pakistan did not had any, for that matter, intent of starting a war with India. They started the war, and after that, obviously, we were left with no other option but to respond.
Hmm.
And it's not like we were out there to completely, for that matter, destroy their airfields and
Hmm.
all those kinds of things. We also had to do very precision strikes.
ठीक.
Because when you go on to strike an enemy, आपको
Hmm.
उसमें proportionate रखना पड़ता है. And
ठीक.
we also have to make sure that as restraint is shown, because you do not want to jump up the on the escalation ladder in such scenarios. So we were able to destroy quite a lot of infrastructure in India, along with that a lot of casualties. और
Hmm.
हमें ये याद रखना चाहिए कि जो हमारा रिस्पॉन्स आया वो तो बाद में आया, बट द डे दैट इंडिया एक्चुअली केम इन, we were able to down five of their aircrafts, and
Hmm.
Rafale, for that matter, which they go on to consider as their jewel, for that matter, in their of all the platforms that they've got.
Hmm.
तो जब आपने वो कर दिया था, तो ऑलरेडी आपने एक डोमिनेंस एस्टैब्लिश की थी. लेकिन इसके पीछे जो एक हमें जो समझने की जरूरत है वो ये है कि इंडिया somehow wants to start a war under the nuclear ambit, under
Hmm.
the shadow of a nuclear uh, weapon, two nuclear weapon states. उस न्यूक्लियर शेडो के अंदर वॉर पॉसिबल नहीं है. उस न्यूक्लियर शेडो के अंदर एट द एंड ऑफ द डे एक इम्पॉसिबिलिटी है कि आप पाकिस्तान पे अटैक करेंगे और पाकिस्तान रिटेलिएट नहीं करेगा. एंड आई वाज लिसनिंग टू द press conference of the other sides on their military leadership, and they said that our aim was to strike the so-called terrorist groups within Pakistan. But even if that was your aim, at the end of the day, you should expect very well that you have actually breached the territorial integrity of a state, sovereignty of the state, and they are going to retaliate, which
Hmm.
is exactly what our DGMO told them on the first communication that he got. So ये important है कि इन चीज़ों को understand करने की ज़रूरत है कि ये कोई न्यू नॉर्मल सेट नहीं हो सकता, और पाकिस्तान ने स्टेटस को एंटी रिस्टोर किया है, which is required, by the way, in South Asia, so that such conflicts do not happen again and again.
Great. Actually, there's also quite a lot of a fog of war, uh, of course, and information we countries try to restrain information in these circumstances. When it comes to claiming military success, they are often exaggerated, as you would know, in times like these, where there's military conflict involved. Um, to how much extent Pakistan has faced damage in terms of their air bases?
I believe हम फिर भी काफी transparent रहे हैं in
Hmm.
terms of what we have done, and that is something that is actually quite important.
Yeah.
We have seen that the Indians actually tried their best to launch strikes against multiple air bases, airfields airfields within Pakistan.
Hmm.
Uh, there has been minor damages, hangar और कुछ airstrips वगैरह के ऊपर damage हुए. Other than that, we know कि एक AWACS हमारा जो साहब जो है उस पे कुछ थोड़ा minor damage है. But if you compare that with what has happened in India,
Hmm.
you would actually see कि ये बहुत minimal है, and it could have been much more worse for that matter if we weren't ready. बट ये बड़ी फिटाइल डिबेट है. दिस इज
Hmm.
एन एक्सरसाइज इन फिटिलिटी. क्या आप ये देखते रहें कि जीता कौन और हारा कौन? बिकॉज इंडिया नोज वेरी वेल व्हाट वी हैव डन, the kind of damage that they have faced, and that is why they ended up asking for a ceasefire. So now that if we go on to this, मतलब in this discussion, or as far as you said कि अभी states बता नहीं रही या बोल, this would become inevitably this is going to come up because ये हर conflict के बाद आपको, and it's a matter of days if not weeks.
Hmm.
आप अभी सैटेलाइट इमेजरी देख रहे हैं, अभी आप एनालिसिस देखेंगे, आप ऑलरेडी ग्लोबल ओपिनियंस देख सकते हैं. इवन कंजर्वेटिव मैगजीन्स आउट देयर
Hmm.
are saying very openly that Pakistan was able to perform much better.
Yeah.
So that is a matter of national pride. But with that, we should also actually understand that this is something that needs to be avoided in the context of subcontinent.
Hmm. Great. Okay. Now let's move on to misinformation, the element of misinformation during this crisis. Of course, we've seen misinformation on both sides. लेकिन जब बात इंडिया की आती है और बिलखसूस इंडियन मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया की आती है, तो it's not as Pakistanis, but Indians themselves are infuriated over their media's coverage of the war. When they came out and said कि Indian forces जो हैं, Indian army पाकिस्तान में घुस गई है और इंडियन नेवी ने कराची पोर्ट को पे हमला कर दिया है और वो सब कुछ. It was, what did you make of that situation actually?
Achha, I'm not an expert in media. I think you are an expert in media, so you can go on to tell us better. But from what I have seen on Indian media, उस दिन जब ये सारी information आ रही थी, I think Indian media has played a very negative role, by the way, not in this particular crisis, but even before that.
Hmm.
I mean, जब भी escalations हुई हैं between India and Pakistan, एंड इस दफ़ा तो खैर दे बिल्कुल ही एक नया रिकॉर्ड क्रिएट कर लिया जाके उन्होंने कि ये कराची लाइक यू मेंशन अटैक्स हो रहे हैं एंड ऑल दैट. बट आई थिंक ये डिलिबरेट मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन थी टू एक्चुअली वन वे और द अदर प्लेसेट द क्वार्टर्स विद इन इंडिया, जो एक बहुत अग्रेसिव उनको लग रहा था कि कोई अटैक्स हो रहे हैं जाके. एंड ये भी एक आई थिंक ट्रेजिडी है.
When it comes to again engagements between India and Pakistan, today we have heard कि जो military talks थे between the two countries, they've been postponed, they've been delayed until Monday now. आप क्या समझते हैं कि as Trump said, Donald Trump, कि there are not, this is not only ceasefire, but there are also going to be talks between the two countries about Indus Waters Treaty and other things as well. Is that going to happen?
I think today the DGMOs did speak on the hotline that did take place. But we also have to understand that after such a long conflict, which has been referred almost to an equivalent of a war by the DGMO on the Indian side, we have to understand that it would take time for the hostilities to obviously come down. And what they must be discussing is how to ensure that the ceasefire holds for a longer period of time and peace is created on both sides of the LOCs. कल आई थिंक अच्छा दिन था इस लिहाज से कि कोई फायर नहीं हुआ ऑन LOC फॉर दैट मैटर, मेजर कोई एज सच एंगेजमेंट नहीं हुई जाके yesterday night, which is a very good development. And other than that, we also have to understand कि ये जो अभी जो हमारी जो सीज फायर एग्जिस्ट कर रही थी जाके, ये 2021 में बाय RDGISI एंड उनका नेशनल सिक्योरिटी एडवाइजर ने एक सीज फायर का एग्रीमेंट किया था जिसकी बेसिस के ऊपर वो चल रही थी. ऑब्वियसली ये goes back to the Musharraf era, but renew हुआ है 2021 में. So we have to see whether this would continue to exist or not. And this is something that we'll get to know in the coming days. But other than that, I think बहुत कुछ है जिस पे बात होनी चाहिए. और the political leadership also needs to talk about it. As far as what President Trump has said is actually our win, because India is the one that has long been saying that due to the Shimla agreement, वो किसी भी third party mediation को कभी भी जाके accept नहीं करेंगे. But this time around, we have seen that President Trump announced himself, followed by Secretary Rubio and others, that the ceasefire has been actually brought into existence by the Americans and the Saudis and others. सो वो जो थर्ड पार्टी इंटरवेंशन है वो हो गया. इंडिया का जो दूसरा सबसे बड़ा लॉस हुआ है वो ये है कि वो हमेशा से कश्मीर को इंटरनेशनलाइज नहीं करना चाह रहे थे. दिस टाइम अराउंड वी हैव सीन कश्मीर इशू इन इटसेल्फ rightfully so has been internationalized. Now every country, every major power has been talking about it, and they understand that this is the key to resolving the dispute between India and Pakistan. That is another damage that the Modi regime has ended up actually perpetuating, for that matter. सो यहाँ पर ये भी एक बहुत बड़ा लॉस है. अब कितना आई मीन एक्सेप्टेबल है, मेरे ख्याल से तो बहुत एक्सेप्टेबल होनी चाहिए टॉक्स इन द फ्यूचर, एंड आई एम स्टिल प्रैग्मेटिक के लिए अगर आप इसको देखें तो व्हाट एक्चुअली प्रिवेल नाउ इज दैट बोथ साइड्स हैव सीन आफ्टर ऑपरेशन स्विफ्ट रिटॉर्ट एज वेल एज आप जाकर कि हम नहीं ये अफोर्ड कर सकते कि आफ्टर एवरी टेररिस्ट अटैक, condemnable terrorist attacks, but आप जाकर इस तरह दूसरी कंट्री की sovereignty, territorial integrity को violate करें. So I think we also have to recognize one more thing, that India is saying that whenever there's going to be a terrorist attack, they're going to strike into Pakistan. That is something that Al-Qaeda wanted. I mean, this was something that Al-Zawahiri had long talked about. We have to somehow get these two nuclear neighbors to actually fight with each other. So iska matlab you're actually inviting terrorists like ISIS and other organizations.
Hassan, as far as the wider regional repercussions are concerned, when it comes to the conflict between India and Pakistan, how do you see the future of this region?
I think हमने both India and Pakistan बहुत नुकसान पहुंचाया South Asia as a region को. We have been fighting for a very long period of time. साक इंडिया की वजह से आज साक का समिट नहीं हुआ बहुत सालों से जाके, and it's time that the political leadership actually goes on to negotiate with each other, talk with each other. ठीक है, आप एक closed fist के साथ बात नहीं कर सकते, but there needs to be a realization on the Indian side now to talk to Pakistan.
हसन, आपको लगता है कि इस क्राइसिस ने पाकिस्तान को यूनाइट कर दिया? पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज, अवाम, मिलिट्री, ऑल द स्टेक होल्डर्स, उन सबको यूनाइट कर दिया, और अगर किया तो कितना अरसा ये यूनिटी चलेगी पाकिस्तान में?
I think first and foremost, whenever there is a threat from an enemy, जब एक external threat होता है, तो nations usually unite होती हैं. So this is something that happened in Pakistan also. हमें याद रखना चाहिए कि हम बहुत ही एक divisive और polarized nation बन गए, और उस polarization और divisiveness को खत्म करना काफी मुश्किल होता जा रहा है. इस इंसिडेंट में जो एक बात प्रूव की है वो ये की है कि irrespective of whatever ethnicity, ideology, or for that matter political affiliation that we have, when it comes down to the defense and the territorial integrity of Pakistan, we are all together. So I think that is very important. Other than that, for how long it will last, I cannot go on to comment on that, because we still have जो fundamental issues हैं वो आज भी exist करते हैं. But कुछ चीजें clear जरूर होती हैं कि at the end of the day, whenever Pakistan's territorial integrity, sovereignty would be challenged, we would come together as a nation and fight it off. And that, I think, is a good message to all our adversaries around the world.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time.